So this week we'll be learning about initiators 2.7. If you look at here, 2.7.1 is about initiators and 2.7.2 is about arrays. That is the open book quiz for the assessment. If you look, it combines, there's questions from both the modules, and the assessment is also based on the two modules. And exams are starting this week, so you don't want to usually write. Yeah, on the day you usually write your assessment.
It's either 1 or 9.
Sorry?
1 or 9.
It's either 1 or 9. When? The day?
The
day, yeah. Day. Is it Thursday? And there's people writing maths on Thursday. So you can come and write that test anytime you are free during this week or next week. So it is not it's not open just for only one day. So you can prepare for it. Then when you are free, then you can come in and write. Sure. But first, we're going to look at the initiators. Last week we looked at vectors and what vectors are. By now we should know what that is. Said we use vectors to specify variables of the same type, but more than one variable. It's a way that it's easier to use vectors if you want to declare values or variables of the same type, but multiple of them, instead of declaring one variable. Each variable, like if you want to declare 5 variables of the same type, like of integers, 5 variables of integers, instead of declaring each one. You're not in this class. Are you in this class? It's not programming, computing application. So I was saying, if you want to declare 5 variables of the same type, let's say int, instead of declaring each one separately, you can use a vector or an array. Like here, we used an array named vector that contains 5 elements, and inside those curly braces, those are the variables that we want to store in that array, and all of them are of the same type, integer. We say that that number 5 inside the square brackets, it specifies the number of elements that can be contained in that array. But if you can also say, you can say that the number of elements in that array must be 5, but it is allowed to put in values that are less than 5 inside that array. Then the remaining 2 will be assumed to be zeros. to make up that 5. So in here you'll have 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, then 2 zeros to make up that 5. But you cannot specify that the number of elements should be 5, then you put in more than 5 elements. Then that is not allowed. It will produce an error if you do that. If you see in here they say the vector should have 5 elements, but there's more than 5 elements in there, which is wrong. And another thing is if there is no value inside the brackets, then the compiler will assume that the number of elements is in that array is equals to the number of values that you have declared inside the curly braces. In this case, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It will assume that the number of elements of that array should be 7. Okay. Then we can look at arrays. And this material is from a different source, from C++ tutorials. They still explain what an array is, how to declare an array, that is the syntax for an array, the type, the name, and the number of elements. Now to initialize arrays is type, the name, in brackets the number of elements, then the equal sign. That is your initial values inside the curly braces, your initial values of the array. And remember, it is separated by commas. The values are separated by commas. Like we saw from the previous source, you can specify that the number of arrays is 5, but you can store values that are less than 5, but not more. And if you don't specify the elements or the values inside that array, but you say that they must be 5, then the compiler will assume that those elements are 5 zeros, since you have not specified them. And accessing the values in an array. Last week we talked about the indexing of arrays. We said it starts from 0. So the first element in an array is in index 0, and the second is at 1, and so on. So if you want to store, like in this example, if you want to store the value of 75 in the third element, then the third element is index 2. That's why they have 2 in the brackets. And if you want to copy the value in the third element to x, then we will say x is equals to foo. Since we're looking for the third element, then that should be 2. And always notice the difference between declaring an array and accessing an element in an array. If we declare an array, there should always be the type, the name of an array, and the number of elements inside that array. Then if you want to access an element inside that array, there is the name of the array and the index where we will find that value that we want to access, that the value we want to put in that index 75. This is an example that adds all the numbers inside an array. We did a different example last week, but it's just that the values are the same. In this case, there is those values 16, 2, 77, 40, and that. And then with the use of a for loop, the initial value of the result is 0. Then foo is equals to foo plus n. N is the index of the numbers in the array. So when n is 0, then the value at 0 will be 16. Then n will increment by 1, which will add 16 to 2, get a result of that, and add 77, add 40, and add 12,071, and we'll get that result. It adds all the numbers in the array. And then we go to multi-dimensional arrays. Multi-dimensional arrays are called arrays of an array. It's like this should be like a table with rows and columns. Like in this class, we have rows. We have 8 rows, and how many columns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. So if you have one dimensional array, which is the simple array that we know, it will be just this row, which is, say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then now if you have a bidirectional array, then we also include the number of columns. Do you get that? So it's like this. It's like a table where you have rows and columns, and inside those, like inside these chairs, there should be any values that you can access. You can access those values in that chair, or you can put in a value in that chair. So this is how we declare bidirectional arrays. So you have your rows, the number of rows, and a number of columns. So in this case, they have three rows and 5 columns. And it's not limited to just bidirectional arrays. You have multi-dimensional arrays with, like if you look at here, from there to there, that's bidirectional. Then you add more tables and more tables. So the way you do this is, a compiler doesn't see that this table has 3 rows and columns. It doesn't see it as a table like this. but it sees it as just one array. But as a programmer, you use the rows and columns to make things easy for you. But the compiler doesn't see it like that. What the compiler will see is like, it will just multiply the rows and the columns, then you'll have 15 arrays. 15 elements in that array. So it's also up to you if you use that or that, because the way they've declared in here is the same thing. Do you see that? And arrays as parameters. A parameter is sometimes called an argument. It is a value that is passed into a function. But we haven't covered functions yet. But in the next unit, maybe in programming 1, you'll learn about functions. So arrays can also be passed as arguments for a function. If you look at this example here, there's a function called print array. That is the first argument or parameter. That is the array. And then the second argument, that is the length, which is the length of the array. So this for loop will populate the array, and then it will print it out. And then in our main, we have our first array, which is 5, 10, and 15. And our second array, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then we pass both of these arrays to the function. First we pass the first array, and we specify the number of elements inside that array that should be printed out. Then that goes into the function, and it will print out that first array. And then we pass the second array, which has five elements, and it will be printed out there. Okay, that's the end of today's lesson.